my kidneys shut down
Mhm.
in the hospital, and then like right when I got out of the hospital was Highlander night, right? And I wasn't allowed to go to Highlander night, and I found my way down there anyway, right?
I think I
And
remember that.
yeah, he caught me drinking on the beach with the rest
Yeah.
of the Marines, and he walks up to me, and I like to this day I remember like we're standing there, and I know I'm getting emotional. I'm sorry, but
No, dude.
he was like, "Lloyd, are you trying to kill yourself?" I said, "Yeah, like, yeah, why not, right?"
Welcome to episode 4 of False Motivation.
So, episode 4, we're going to be going over leadership, accountability, and how our past experiences have formed us into the leaders we are today.
Good stuff.
Sweet.
Yep. And as always, leadership quote. And I struggle with reading, so bear with me. The challenge the challenge of leadership is to be strong but not rude. Be kind but not weak. Be bold but not a bully. Be thoughtful but not lazy. Be humble but not timid. Be proud but not arrogant. Have humor but without folly. Yeah.
Check.
So
Fine
basically,
line.
have the trait, just don't go. Have all the traits, just don't go to an extreme or in
Right.
the opposite
Like
direction.
ride the middle line there. Because all of those are good. They're good leadership traits unless we
That
take it to the extreme.
actually, so that actually lends into a good thought process for me. For when it comes to leadership, one of the best things I ever learned actually from my father. He told me, like, when you grow up and you get all these jobs and you learn from people, your leadership, you'll run into all sorts of different types of leaders. He said, pick a trait from that leader that you like and use that as becoming the leader that you want to be. So every leader that you go through, you kind of pick up a habit or behavior. And like when I came across somebody who was a great leader and somebody who like motivated me, like, when you meet just a great fucking leader, you're like, no, I'd follow that guy anywhere. Like, he's in charge. We're good with that. Those personality types stick out. And then sometimes if you really look at it, you can figure out what they're doing that makes it different, right? They're being honest, they're being respectful, there's certain like behaviors that you can pick out. And if you take those, you can build your own level of leadership through the experience of people you pick up from everyone else.
Absolutely.
That has been the best piece of advice I've ever had, and it has shaped me immensely.
Yeah, when the thing where I'm at right now, and with my leadership, like my own personal leadership style, where I'm at with it is as I continue in my job and continue to grow in my job, I'm always learning or trying to learn, right? And I'm finding that like my leadership style of just a couple years ago isn't what's working for me today, right? And I'm struggling I'm struggling right now as a leader, right? If
Okay.
I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Um my leadership style of just a couple years ago isn't working today. And it's not like I would love to point at the younger generation, right? And say it's their fault because they're soft and they're weak. But for me, it's not. That ain't it, right? That's not the answer. And I'm struggling with being. I'm struggling with the ability to adapt, right?
Yes.
And grow because I hate change, right? So so like you said, like I have a lot of bad examples of
Yeah.
leadership, and I have a lot of good ones. And trying to, I feel like the more that I'm taking the good and applying that to my leadership style and it doesn't work, I revert to the bad because I don't because it's easier, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's more of what you know,
Yeah.
right? Because it's you revert back to defaults is what you revert back to in times of stress and like anxious states or whatnot. You go back to what is easiest for you to confidently do.
Yeah. The
It's
only
not
thing
always right.
yeah, the only thing that I can stand on and stand by is I want my guys or gals or others, right?
Yeah.
I want the people that work with me
Mhm.
to know without a shadow of a doubt that I have their back 110%.
Mhm.
That's I don't care about anything else. I just want like I care about a lot. I take that back. There's a lot of things I care about,
Yeah.
but I want them at the end of the day, if I make a bad decision or not, right? I want them to go, yeah, he made a bad decision, but he's standing by it
Mhm.
and he's holding himself accountable. And at the end of the day, he has our back and our best interest in mind.
Do you have a lot of examples, a lot of scenarios to display those?
Where I'm making bad decisions.
No, where you get to show you're making the ones that reinforce your character that you want people to see.
There are a lot of little ones, and it goes as far it's with the day to days, right?
Mhm.
Like when someone comes at one of my people, and they're not mine, they don't belong to me, but when someone comes at somebody that works with me on my equipment, when someone comes at them, I have their back, right?
Yeah.
And I'm their advocate, right? And like that happens quite a bit. I don't want to get into like a specific instance,
Yeah, yeah.
just because of the nature of my job and what I do. But
I honestly don't think you need to get into a specific one either, but, so you have do they see you doing that behavior, showing that behavior of who you wanna be as a leader?
I hope so.
Well, so, like I'm saying so when I ask that question, is it those displays, are they publicly in front of people? Like, do
So
people see them, or are they kinda, like, behind the closed doors things, like, when you go confront another leader for doing something stupid, you don't do it in front of people, but
I it depends, because a lot of the times, man, to be honest, like I'm one of those. I'll say it, right, like
yeah.
right off the cuff. But a lot of most of the time, it's behind closed doors when I do that stuff, so they don't necessarily see all the backing
Mhm. And
that they.
that's hard.
Yeah,
That's because people are gonna gain their respect from seeing your behavior. You're gonna
but
build it
you
off the personality.
yeah, but you can't. There's a fine line, right? Because I
Yeah,
can't. Sometimes you just can't have that argument at a public level,
I
right?
absolutely understand, yeah.
Or that discussion.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's appropriate. Sometimes like, hey, my guy's been working all day. Like
Mhm.
why don't you go ahead and have your guys do it, right?
Mhm.
Or something to that effect. Or just like,
Yeah.
hey, like my folks have been working hard. You know what I mean? Like they're not doing that today. They're gonna do something else.
Mhm.
I think you hit a good point, talking about like struggling with the adaptability and trying not to just blame the quote unquote new generation, because I've never like you recognizing that you struggle with that is a characteristic that makes you a good leader, because every bad leader I've ever had in my life, whether above me or adjacent to me, never had any kind of like introspective thought on whether or not they were being a good leader or not. They just they were, almost, I don't know if I'd go as far as say as egotistical, but they were very ego driven, and because they were a leader, that was what they built their whole life around. They were a leader. And they never thought to stop and say, well, am I doing this right, or am I doing a good job at this, am I providing what my guys need, like, so I think it's cool that like you like that. I think that's an admirable characteristic to have, that you recognize that you're struggling with this and you're doing things to adapt, because a bad leader wouldn't do that. A bad leader would just say, you know, we hear it all the time. Oh, this new generation is a bunch of sissies and blah blah blah, whatever. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Commend you.
Fortunately, I have people around me who check me a lot.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying? And like sometimes they get a little out of hand, right? And you gotta kind of corral them back in and be like, hey, at the end of the day, I'm the boss, right? Or I'm the IC, or I'm, the engine boss, or I'm the captain, or whatever. Like sometimes you gotta reel them back in.
Yeah.
But I do listen to their feedback, right? Because we've all had that leader where it's you like speak a concern and it falls on deaf ears, or they tell you to shut up, right?
Yeah, they
Or
brush it off like it don't matter.
yeah,
Mhm.
and it's or they have excuses out, out the ass, and it's like I don't want to be that. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like,
Yeah.
but I definitely have people in my corner who, like, not only subordinates but counterparts who I can talk to, and they're like, maybe you should try this approach, or maybe you should try that approach, right? And like, I don't know. I just feel like if more people did that, would be better off, and then follow
Absolutely.
through, right? Don't just listen to it, but like follow through.
Yeah. Well, so the biggest takeaway I have ever had from the Marine Corps was the ability to work with any group of people and
Mhm.
build a successful team based on the people you have and not being worried about having the best people you can have. Like, you want great people, yeah, but sometimes in the Marine Corps you get stuck with some freaking turds. And if you know what you're doing and you know how to really maximize somebody's potential, you can make an effective team even out of the shitbags, right?
Man, yeah,
Like it's the Mighty Duck story, right? Like, you going in there, you find just a bunch of turds who have no idea what the hell they're doing, and then you corral them up together, and then all of a sudden you use people the way they know how, they have their unique skills. Next thing you know, you're in a winning team because you found a flow for the whole team. That's the biggest takeaway I had from the Marine Corps, was the ability to work with any group of people and make a team successful.
I took
And
a project management class. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just saying that's the essence of leadership, from my personal opinion.
I took a project management class. Let's see. So I'm working on my bachelor's degree. So 2 classes ago, and the professor for the class was like super hard on this like 3-step process to building a team for a project. And she was like cut and dry, like, this is how every team is formed. It doesn't matter if it's a sports team or whatever it is. This is how it goes. And I had a really good discussion with her about, like, I have experience, and the first step in that is to getting to know your team. And I had a really good discussion with her, a really long discussion with her about, like, I've been a part of, even if a working party is a team, right? Where
Yeah.
5 or 6 of us come together. I don't know anything about the guy on my left, anything about the guy on our right, but we all just fall into a groove and work really well together. So I think
Yeah.
that good, I think that good, good leaders and good followers um, are like really good at falling into place. You don't have to necessarily, know the guy's birthday and if their wife's pregnant and what they do for a hobby and all this other stuff to have effective leadership. What do you guys think about like being a leader and being a subject matter expert in your field? Do you think that to be an effective leader, you have to be a subject matter expert, or do you think that you can be an effective leader and not know anything about the job?
I think that one, personally, from being in a very technical field, I think that one depends on the product you or group you, or the thing you are doing, right? The thing you're specializing in. Because if you need to make leadership decisions based off of a technical set of knowledge, then you're not going to be as successful as somebody who is a knowledge level expert, right? But there are things where I don't think you need to be you don't need to be a technical expert on something in order to organize people in order to effectively do things, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I've ran into, I grew up in the logging industry, and then I've been a blue collar worker since I got out of the Marine Corps. And to
Yeah.
me, an effective leader was always the guy that knew the most about the job. He was always the guy that you could go to and ask questions, and they'd have answers. And even in the Marine Corps, it was really like that too. Your leaders, at least in my experience in my MOS, our leaders were very knowledgeable about the field that I was in. But I'm getting a bachelor's degree in information security, and what I'm finding in this field as I meet more people and kind of learn more about the field is it's kind of impossible to be a subject matter expert in a cyber, like a information security project, I would say, because there's so many different facets of it. And same thing with programming, and there's a billion different programming languages out there that it's kind of impossible for who would be a project manager or a senior level leader to know all this stuff. So I can see how different fields might have different requirements for leadership knowledge and experience.
So what I would say to that is, you can be a leader, you can be a great leader, right, and not have any knowledge of the field you're in, right? But you're not going to lead a group in that field, right? Like until you have brilliance in the basics. So in your instance, Kevin, like I would say, get brilliance in the basics, right? Because to be in, and I'm going to speak from my experience, right? If I'm standing there and I'm looking at a problem and I don't know anything about my field, my craft, I have a group of people looking at me to lead and direct them safely, efficiently, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not competent in my ability to do so. I'm losing the trust of everybody around me. And then when I start making decisions, I'm putting people's lives in danger.
Exactly.
So that's like, even if you have brilliance in the basics, you can do something, right? If you just have brilliance in the basics.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, for sure. I wonder, I see a really hard line between like technology and blue collar world. And I say that because they're so different from a leadership perspective on like what from a basic standpoint. To me, a leader's always been a subject matter expert and somebody that's willing to take responsibility for their team, especially when it comes rolling down the hill. Like the leader should be the one catching that, and the leader should be the one saying, hey, this is on me, this is my fault, this is what I did. But I wonder sometimes about, like, you look at, like, CEOs of big corporations, or like, I don't know if Musk is a good example, but say Bezos, right? Like he doesn't know the ins and out of every facet of his corporation, but he does a good job running it. Or the president. Like the president, I think when you get into those higher levels, it's more important to know people maybe than it is to know a specific skill set.
That's the ability to lead, right? Your ability to put dependencies onto other people and take responsibilities off of yourself, right? So actually, here's a good question. Before we dive deeper into this, what's your definition of leadership, right? Or how would you define being in a leadership role?
So for me, a leader, like there's two types of leaders, right? There's a natural leader who is just that individual who people gravitate towards and look towards for guidance and advice, right? And then you have like the Then you have like the
Do they on that one, does that personality type have to be in a leadership position, or
no,
can they be in a fellow co-working position?
they can be the new guy,
Okay.
right? They can be the new guy and just have that aura, right? Where people naturally want to follow them. But
Yeah.
what comes with that is it's the same characteristics as we look at in those guys who are subject matter experts, right? They're the guys who are dependable, the guys who are reliable, the guys who strive to better themselves, right? They're the guys who put off confidence, not cockiness, but confidence.
Mm-hmm.
They're the guys who are, and I say guys is just a general term here. They're, whoever it is, right?
People. Yeah.
People. Um, I'm not trying to be some woke dude over here, but I work with females who are absolutely great leaders, right?
Yeah.
Um, like they exhibit all those great characteristic traits. They just haven't been there long enough to know the ins and outs of everything. That doesn't mean
Yeah.
that they're not great leaders, right? And then you have the great leaders who started that way and molded themselves into a great leader because of their time and experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's like there was someone said you can't train leadership, or what was it? There's some
Can't
stupid
teach,
quote out there like you can't
teach leadership.
so no, it's something more. I always thought it was bullshit though. It's because you can grab someone who's not a very good leader and you can train them to be a good leader, right?
Yeah.
It just takes time. It just takes time and effort and experience.
Yeah.
Right. And they have to want it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's because leadership's all about how you're influencing other people. Especially when you get further into the tech field, you realize you don't have to be a technical expert in order to be a leader, but like you have to have like an outline understanding, right? So for the startup I was in, I was the CTO and stuff, chief technology officer. And whenever we would deal with a contractor, you're hiring people who are better at things than you are, and they know way more than you do. But your ability to lead had everything to do with your ability to utilize their skill sets, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're like, hey, you're the skilled expert here. You're the skilled expert. How do I use you in order to make everyone else as productive as possible? Right? That's your ability to build your team, utilize your team.
Yeah. And that's man, I spent so much time this year and I recruited some help in
Yeah.
being like, let's find what this individual is good at and
Mhm.
exploit that, right?
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes it's that sometimes it can be difficult, right? Like,
Mhm.
because everything else is so glaring. And really, like, one thing I give this kid, he wrote down the weather every time it was on the radio. Like, you're like, he knew the weather, right? He's
Yeah.
just like, hey man, like, what's the weather right now? And he'd be like, it's 23% RH, 96 degrees, wind coming out of the southwest, 4 to 6. Like, I mean, that was his niche, right? Like
It was
he
his
had,
way to mean something.
yeah, it was his. I mean,
Or contribute.
regardless of anything else, like that was, I mean, you knew, like, if you missed it, homie got it. He would stop and pull out a notepad and write it down.
That's
Right.
awesome.
Like, but it was, I recruited the people in the truck, and was like, hey guys, like, help me find what this kid is good at, and let's exploit that. Like, at
Mhm.
the end of the day, we'll talk about it. We'll have a discussion, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, we were talking about an employee behind his back, but like,
Well, you're
it was,
growing him though.
but it was my way. It was my way of trying to, because there's people out there who are just bad at their job, right? They
Mhm.
shouldn't be there. And it was prevalent that he was bad at his job, and everybody, including myself, was just focusing on the negative. It was my way of trying to focus on, like, look for the positives,
Mhm.
right? Good, bad, or indifferent. Like, I know someone's gonna watch this and you'll be like, man, what an asshole. But like, like, I was honestly trying to find positives in this individual, and he did weather great, perfect. Every time he had it, he wrote down.
Well, so sometimes people only need that win, right? They start that winning snowball. They get a couple good wins in there. You put them in a position where they can win, and then you let them grow from there, right? It's as long as they don't just sit right there and that's where they're going to stay. But as they're spending the time to actually grow, like, dude,
Yeah.
a small win is so massive for some people who've never had one before.
Right.
Yeah, what a boost to that kid's self-confidence to know that, like, he had a job. He had
Yeah.
something that he knew he could do.
Look, here's the deal. Like, I'm gonna be real about it, right? He's a Marine. He's an infantryman, right? Another
Yep.
Marine. And I rode him so hard because I have higher expectations for us, right? Like, you
Sure.
come to me and you're like, "Hey, I was Marine infantry." My expectation for you is now up here above everybody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
Whether that's right, wrong, or whatever, that's just the way I am. And I rode him so hard, like, and when I would tell him, "Hey, man, like, you did a good job," it made his day. He was so happy, and I probably, like, looking back, like I said, I'm trying to better myself as a leader, right? Like, looking back, I should have done that more often,
hmm
right? It probably would have made our relationship a lot stronger if I had.
Well, it's funny. So the story you just described, I swear to God, I've had those scenarios where I just could not figure out how to do certain things. And I had that one thing that they were like, hey, instead of us letting you go, let's figure out what you are good at and having you do that. And then those are the scenarios where I actually had some of the largest growth in my life, right? Because then I found somewhere to concentrate on. And then from there, I was like, well, okay, this is where I'm at. I want to be there. And usually those were also the leaders who were willing to take the time to say, okay, well, let's take you from there to there
Mhm.
and actually get you there. Right.
Yeah.
Dude, that is something that's going to stick with that dude for the rest of his life.
I don't know.
I honestly think it has a huge effect on people.
Yeah, but it didn't it didn't end well for that individual. But
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know, we all make decisions that,
Yeah.
you know, need to have consequences
Well,
for.
yeah, maybe
but
you live, you learn.
if his only takeaway, if his only positive takeaway from that was that interaction with you, then that's a win. That's still a win, you know what I mean? Like, he still learned something about himself. Maybe he's gonna go be a meteorologist now. Probably not, but at least like, you instilled something in that dude. And it helped you too because you learned something about being a leader.
Right.
Yeah.
You learned a methodology that works.
So, it's I'm not like I have what I took away from the Marine Corps was an intolerance for stupid questions. Right?
Ooh. I'm frequently known for stupid questions. So
Now I
I
know
don't
this is gonna irritate a lot of listeners when they're like, "There is no stupid questions." Yes, there is. Right? Maybe not so much the stupid question, like stupid timing. Right?
Mm.
And I like when I'm in the middle of something and you come in and you ask me, something like,
When's
what time
chicken?
is lunch? When's lunch today? Right? And like we're fighting a fire. Like, man, chow's continuous, homie. You know what I'm saying? Like, go back to work. Right? Like,
Thomas.
it's not a corporate office. But like that's my downfall is not being patient. I'm not very patient. And like that's like I know that it sounds like I'm like really criticizing myself here, but it's for me it's I'm going back to work tomorrow and these are just reminders for me to be a better person, right? To be a better leader.
Have you ever done any research into stoicism?
No, nothing
Do you
beyond
know what
TikTok.
stoicism is?
I have an idea of like to me it's somebody who can keep their emotions at bay in
Mhm.
times of chaos.
Yeah, that's the stoic response to things. But so there's the methodology. I couldn't really speak to the methodology now that I try to clarify it myself. But there's a whole methodology and learning behind stoicism, and it used to actually be widely taught. Or it was a school or something like that. Back in the day at one point. I'll share a link to a video. It's great on giving you the 4 pillars of stoicism and getting that. But if you do some research into it and learn more about it, super helpful.
Yeah. I'm not saying I'm the worst leader out there, guys. That's not what
Yeah.
I'm saying. I'm just saying I know my holes and my weaknesses, and those are something
Yeah.
that I'm trying to better.
Well, like
So,
Kevin was saying, being a good leader is growing. Is somebody who's willing to grow, right?
yeah. I don't. Do you remember, John? Do you remember me as a Lance Corporal?
Yes.
So,
Yes, I do.
dude, who was our platoon sergeant at that time? Was that Allred?
Allred when we deployed.
Okay, he was a great leader in
But
my
it was
opinion.
Vasquez, I think his name was. Who was before him? Big yoke dude. Ninja. He stayed back.
Staff Sergeant Ruiz. Carlos.
Yeah.
Carlos
Yeah.
Ruiz.
Yeah. So, right. Yeah. That's
Yeah. Also another great leader. But like you and I'm just gonna go with the ranks that you guys were when I left.
Yeah.
So you were a corporal.
Yeah.
And Corporal Mir.
Dude. I love that dude showing up into the platoon, but once we deployed, his live action version of his leadership was not something I was proud to talk about.
But one thing he did for me,
yeah,
that stuck with me was when I was going through whatever the hell it was I was going through, right? Life.
Yeah.
And I went to SATCO, right?
Yeah.
Which SATCO is Substance Abuse Counseling Office. And I started to do AA, right?
Yeah.
And then I fell off that because I wasn't ready.
Mm-hmm.
Corporal Mir, and I don't know if it was direction from the platoon sergeant or whoever, but on the weekends I had to go to Corporal Mir's house and spend the weekend with him, right? And I got to watch him be a dad.
Really?
Yeah, with his kids.
That's phenomenal. He's a great person. Like as a human being, I love that dude. He was awesome.
Yeah. But that's, to me, like that was a great example of taking care of your Marines, right?
Yeah.
Like he didn't owe me shit. I was a shithead, right? I had my own battles that I was dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And I was that salty Lance Corporal, right?
From knowing him, being stationed with him prior to coming to the unit with him.
Yeah.
Because we were in Bangor together. I honestly would not be surprised if his choice to have you come to his house was just purely on him. Because he was that type of guy. He would go above and beyond to take care of his people in those regards.
Yeah, he was trying to teach me how to drive. Like, I mean, to me, like they were those aren't little things, right? Those are you're taking away from your family to make sure Lance Corporal dipshit over here, doesn't get drunk and get another fight, right?
Right.
Like those are great. That to me were examples of great leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you just PT'd the fuck out of us, right? Like, which I needed, right?
Well, so that was our dynamic. Was he was the brains, I was the muscle.
And yeah, I remember that because like you put me. I don't know if it was you. I think it was you put me in charge of the overweight. Marines.
Yeah, it was me.
And I had to like go to the gym with these guys and like make sure that they were eating right.
Right.
Like, but like those were all things to me that like I didn't have. I love the Marine Corps, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I wish I can go back because at that period of time in my life, like I hated it and I had no direction, right? Like, and like I just had so much going on in my life. I didn't know how to process, right? So
Mhm.
like Lieutenant Fall coming into my room and like taking his blouse off and being like, I'm not, like he's like, I'm not your platoon commander right now. I'm just another Marine talking to a Marine.
Yeah.
And I blew him off, right? Like, and I chewed his ass when he took his blouse off and did that. I chewed his ass. And it was like, we have nothing in common. The only thing we have common is the color of the uniform we wear. We didn't
Yeah.
even earn it the same way. Like, how are you going to come in here and try to relate?
Yeah.
Right. And he put his blouse back on and he was like, I can't remember what he said. Um, and he walked out. Right. And then, like, after I got hurt, he came and visited me when I was down in the hospital. And he was, like, he, he was like, man, I'm sorry you're going through this or whatever. Like, we're here for you. And then you guys deployed. Right. And then, like, my kidneys shut down
Mhm.
in the hospital. And then, like, right when I got out of the hospital, was Highlander night. Right. And I wasn't allowed to go to Highlander night. And I found my way down there anyway. Right.
I think
And
I remember that.
yeah, he caught me drinking on the beach with the rest
Yeah.
of the Marines. And he walks up to me and I, like, to this day, I remember, like, we're standing there. And I know I'm getting emotional. I'm sorry, but
No, dude.
he was like, Lloyd, are you trying to kill yourself? I said, yeah. Like, yeah, why not? Right. And he walked away. And, like, that's not his fault, right? Like,
Mhm.
he didn't know the impact that would have, right?
Mhm. He cared.
He cared, but, like, he wasn't equipped. He was 28 fucking years old, right? Like, he was 28 years old. He was not equipped for that, right?
Oh,
But, like, he was one of the greatest leaders I had because he asked the question, right?
Mhm.
And when I said yes, he just didn't know how to respond.
He just respected your response, it sounds like.
He was just like,
I was like, well, if that's really what you want, then like, what's he gonna do? Yell at you and try to convince you otherwise?
like Roger, and like walked away. And like that stuck with me, right? Like, but in my twisted mind,
Mhm.
it was just another person who bailed on me, right?
Yeah.
And like, because I didn't see it at that time. I
Mhm.
was just like, yep, that's about fucking right. Another person who doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And like, I've called him since and talked to him and like made my amends, right? And like, and hashed that out because that's not his fault, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's me being stuck in my disease of alcoholism
Mhm.
and not processing things the way I should, right?
Yeah.
But like the way that he tried to take care of us in that aspect, like to come into my room, take his blouse off and level with me as a man to man, right? And then come down and be like, "You're not supposed to be here. Like, what are you doing? Trying to drink yourself to death? Trying to kill yourself?" Like yeah. And then come and check out, like still check on me in the hospital, like like those are just the big things. Like those aren't the little things. There was a lot of little things he did,
Yeah.
but like I can only hope to be like that type of leader who cares to that extent. If that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. He displayed a value of leadership to you that you are now trying to take on to the next level of being in leadership.
Dude, but I gave him so much shit.
But could you imagine how hard it is to go into a group of Marines being trained as an officer, right? So officer, like they had their hardshipness, their hard ass training themselves, but at the same time, all those infantry guys were like, "You're an officer, you're a joke, you're just fucking here because you read books."
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Like they're supposed to lead people who don't respect them right off the bat. And then they
Yeah.
have to literally try to lead you. Lieutenant Fall was a bit of a different leader from any leader that I think we've ever had. And I fucking loved it because he was like, I don't care. Dude, in Iraq, he would take the saw gun. He'd go out as a saw gunner sometimes. He'd take he'd go and he'd attach himself to a squad and he'd just be like, hey, don't fucking call me by my rank. Just call me by my name. And fucking, I am a Lance Corporal today. Treat me like a Lance Corporal. And he'd go out and train with him. Or not even train with him. These are like live patrols in Iraq.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, he was.
Is there, Chris, now that you're in a senior position and during that time you were obviously you're in a completely different field now, but now that you're in a leadership position and you're recounting this situation you had with he wasn't that much older than you, but he was your senior. Is there anything he could have said in that moment to help you? Or
No.
were you just in a space where like it didn't matter what anybody said? Like
like I said, there was nothing that he tried everything, right? He tried counseling me. He tried giving me extra duties. He took me on the crazy run and made me do sprints up and down the hill until I puked, right? Like he tried leveling with me. There was nothing at that time that he truly could have done.
Did you know what he was trying to do though, when he was doing all these different variations?
No, like I said, because I was so far into self-pity, right? And my alcoholism that the only thing I seen was that day he walked away from me on the beach.
Yeah.
Was the only thing I seen.
Do you now know what he was trying to do then?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
How would you describe that?
What he was trying to do?
Like doing the different types of attempts or hazings or whatever you want to call them in order to get your attention.
Well, he was like I said, he was 28.
Yeah.
So everything that he was doing was straight out of the book, right? And whatever little life experience he had, like trying to make me sweat it out, right? Trying to sit down with me and level with me man to man, right? Like trying to understand me better.
Yeah.
Right. And then trying to relate to me. He tried all the things that I would do today with my hooks. He tried them all. I just wasn't in a headspace to see it.
Yeah. He's trying to connect with you.
Yeah.
And get through.
Yeah. And there's nothing. I could have had the best leader in the world. And I still it wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered. I would have done the same thing because
I think that's the same thing he realized on the beach though, is, as no matter how hard you try to connect to some people, sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's not, like I said, it's not his fault, right? Like that's just where I was at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like if he were to do that today, right, I'd be like, it would be different. It'd be completely different. But then there was just so much inside me. I mean, dude, you remember like they're like, dude, you put a drink in my hand and there was nothing anybody can say or do. Like I was just gonna do me regardless. Right.
Yeah.
Like training, man, I did great in training. I love training.
Yeah.
Right. But like as soon as we hit the bricks, it was go time.
Yeah, we had somebody in the same unit who would consistently get in trouble. We attempted to connect with him on so many different levels, to the point where we brought him into a room and close the curtains, and we beat the crap out of this kid. And we were like, dude, you need to start fucking falling in line. You're gonna get somebody killed if we actually go to deployment and you keep doing this. And he just kept refusing and refusing. And at one point, just so I don't give all the details away, one point I was just like, you know what? We can't get through to you in any point that we've made an attempt to. I was like, dude, call your mom. I was like, I want you to go home or go back to your barracks room. I want you to call your mother, tell her everything that we have done, tell her everything that you have done, and then ask her if this is how she raised you to be. Because he was against he refused to fight it up. He went, so I was living off base at the time. So when I came back after the weekend, he pulled me aside and started fucking crying. Like he just like pulled me into a room. I was like, dude, I need to talk to you. He started fucking bawling his eyes out. And he's like, I had no idea. He's like, I've been so mad at everyone. He's like, I told my mom what you guys have done. She was like, she's like, then I told him the way I was responding and behaving. And she yelled at me. I was like, okay, tell me how to go. He's like, she was disappointed that she's like, I was behaving inappropriately and I didn't realize it. She's like, she didn't raise me to be this type of person. And at that point on, that day forward, moving forward, he was a new human being. Like he was just a different person.
Dude, the Marine Corps is such a wild place.
You better text me with that. You better text me with that name.
I will. But
no, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. There's just
So with your leadership thing that you were talking about earlier, the struggles of adapting, is it getting through to people, or is it accomplishing something as a group, or is it you don't feel like you're motivating? Like where's the struggle feel like it's located?
with like if we have a task, right?
Yeah.
And like the task is, lined out, right? Like we can accomplish the task.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not the problem. It's the day-to-day stuff, right? Where it's a motivation thing.
Mm.
And
Came to the right place.
and yeah. And the problem is I'm such a small piece of the machine that the bigger machine has all this stuff that's clogging the wheel, right?
Yeah.
And it becomes hard to get people to believe in the mission
Yeah.
when everybody knows it's bullshit.
Yeah.
Right. And like it's the stuff that we were raised with, right? Like show up on time, put in the extra work, do what you're told. It's those type of things that like getting people back on that path is difficult because it's like, well, why am I going to do that? Like I'm only paid from 07 to 1730, right? Or I'm only paid from 930 to 1800. Like why am I going to do extra?
Yeah.
Right? Like, or why am I going to go out and do this extra work when nobody else is, right? It's getting people to buy in to like, you're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it for the better of the group. Right.
Okay. So there's, I have a book. I have to remember exactly which book it is. I believe it's either Effective Executive or it is The Habit. I can't remember which one it is. But they talk about changing the mentality and productivity of teams by going in there and changing the values that people put on certain things, right? So this guy went in and he like increased the productivity out of his office by an insane amount. This factory was always at a profit loss or something like that, and they go in there, and what he did was he changed what the team as an organization valued, and that had a trickle down effect and shifted the perspective of the entire group and team, because what it was is they valued a different perspective of things, right? So when you change the values that your team is aiming at, you change the value, right? So how do I say this? You get them to care about other things indirectly.
Right. Okay.
So
Right.
I think I've got a perfect example of what you're talking about. I think So my boss, the Scott, the guy that owns the company that I work for, he owns the truck that I'm sitting in right now. For the truck drivers out there, like they know, like typically you get paid per mile, and the average like wage I've been seeing is like 50 to 65 cents per mile, and a lot of jobs drive this, like, you know, we pay high mileage, we pay retention pay, and that kind of stuff. Scott built a different method where I get a base salary whether the truck's rolling or not, and then he pays for my expenses on the road, which is a huge cost.
Yeah.
And instead of driving, instead of really pushing us as drivers to do what brings value to his company, which is get the load where it needs to go on time no matter what he pushes is that our trucks are clean, you know, inside and out clean, that we eat healthy, and that we are taken care of. So anytime we need time off, anytime we need, you know, he really pushes, like you can really tell that he values the employee more so than the product, because that's what brings the employees, what ultimately brings value to the company. And I think as leaders, if you change your mindset from what can I do to drive better productivity to what can I do to help my team, I think that you know, you shift your values from pumping out the most product to building up the best team. I think that ultimately will drive productivity.
Absolutely. That's phenomenal. That so the way your boss is running things sounds exactly like the lesson taught out of the book that I'm trying to think of. Right. Like I think you gave a perfect example of what I was trying to get at for the most part.
Yeah, like ultimately, you know, getting product to the customer is the bottom line, right? Like
Yeah.
nobody's in business to not make money.
Exactly.
But the way he does that is by treating his employees well, because he works hard for them, and in turn we work hard for him.
Exactly. So Chris, that makes me want to ask, if you were to describe what your team values as a team, what would you say it is?
Money.
Well, that's perfectly understandable. Like I'm not like knocking the head at all.
No, like I think, and I like,
but that can actually be the perspective though. Like if that's what the team values, then the team's being built around those values, if that is the case.
well, like I think more than anything, my team wants to be heard, right, and validated, if that, you know, and like, and that for me is because sometimes I'm just like, fuck, shut up. It's not about you, right?
Yeah.
But that's like, I need to say that to myself more, I think, right? Like, shut up and listen. Because like I feel like everybody, I feel like my team specifically, like they just want to be treated fairly, and they want the opportunities to learn and grow.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking pretty broad for a reason.
Yeah.
But like I think that's what they truly want, is just the room to grow and learn, and for their feelings and thoughts to be heard and validated.
So does your team currently value growth as like the number one aim, like the undertone of what your team is?
I've never asked, but I'm gonna say yes.
All right. Well, yeah. So what I would say is take into consideration of like ask your people what they think the values, like what do you think our team values would be? Like, and like legitimately ask them, not like hey, I want a company answer. Give me like, okay,
Yeah.
what is your actual thought? And then also ask yourself is like, what are the values that you push out as a leader to your team, right? Like, is getting the job done the most important thing and you don't care about the people? Like, I'm not saying you do that, but I'm saying, like, does that how the mentality comes off as behaviors and tasks are handed out, right? Like, it's like a, hey, here, take this, shut the fuck up, it needs to get done. Or is it like, okay, well, who can we help? Like, who can take this next one on and have a learning experience, and who can oversee their learning experience? Make sure it doesn't go like whatever. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to ask?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. And I think, like, I'm gonna go ahead and critique myself here. Like, I think that I think I have a more emphasis on perception, right? Like, I want I know, like, as I'm saying this, I know that it's not right, right? But like, I want that when we're looked at as a whole, right? And I don't want our leadership to be like, those guys are fucked up,
Yeah.
right? I want them to look at that truck and be like, well, these guys over here are struggling with this, but those guys over there, man, they're doing a great job, right? Like, I want them to not give anyone an excuse to run our name into the dirt.
Yeah.
Because, like,
So-
that's a real thing.
So with your guys, it sounds like, and you probably already do this, but it sounds like it'd be beneficial to, you've got like a basic set of expectations that have to be met regardless of anything else.
Right.
But as leader, we can set expectations and say, hey, once you meet these expectations, I'll give you that room. I'll make sure you get that room to grow and learn. And I think that, if you can set the expectations that we're going to be the most squared away truck in the, what do you call it? Division. Battalion. If we're going to be the most squared away truck in the battalion. And once we're the most squared away truck in the battalion, then what do you want? What do you want? What do you want to go to this class? You want to go to that class? You want to, you want to IC an event? Like, what do you want to do?
Yeah. Yeah. And, like, I have a huge, I got a huge deal with, like, and there's a fine line, because if you ask me too much, then I'm going to tell you no. But if you want something, right? Say you want a training opportunity, right? So they're called task books.
Yeah.
And if you want, like, you start off as a firefighter 1 trainee, right? Well, you start off as a temp, and then you go to a firefighter 1 trainee, which is like your very small unit leadership, right? But for me, before I even consider opening that task book for you, and I tell them all this, like, I want you to exhibit those abilities, right? Like, so I'll print the task book out and I'll give it to them and be like, I want you to read this and go through it. But before we open it and I allow you to work on those tasks, I want to see you take the initiative and start leading folks on a daily basis, right? Like, when we get into work, I want you to be like, hey guys, let's clean the windows. Let's fill the ice chest. Let's do the pump checks. I want to see you sharpening tools. I want to see you doing gear checks, right? Like, I want to see you doing those things before I go, okay, now we're going to open the task book and expand that with the task book, right? And it's funny because sometimes, like, I'll get the guy who's like, yeah, let's do that. And then I'll get the guy who's like, well, I've already done all that. And it's like, well, then it shouldn't be a problem, right? Like, if you've already done it, it shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but as you progress, there's a point where you can't do that anymore. Right. Like, but you can exhibit the characteristics of I'm not going to look at my driver and be like, I want you to be able to do these things as an engine boss before I open your task book, because that's not realistic. What is realistic is that you exhibit the characteristics of an engine boss, right? You're punctual, you're on time, you hold people accountable, you hold yourself accountable, right? You come up with game plans. You set forth expectations. You come up with the a work schedule for the day, right? Like those, like I want to see people doing those things before I'm like, okay, let's get you the classes, let's get the task book, right? Like I want to see you as an individual striving to be that before we put you there. Because
Yeah.
a lot of times they'll be like, well, I like this person, right? This is a good person. They're funny. They're my friend. I'm just gonna give them this class and this task book and brush them through it, when they don't really exhibit the characteristics of that position.
Yeah. Are those defined? Are you defining those well to the people though, so that your people know what those definitions are?
I feel
Be-
like I'm laying out my expectations pretty well.
But no, the steps of. I'm trying to think. So
Are you having this conversation that you're having with us, with your guys? Because for me, like, if I wanted to get promoted and I came to you and I said, hey, I want to do this task book, and if you were to just tell me like, well, you're not ready yet, that's gonna throw me off. But if you were to lay out like what you just said here to me, then to me that, and this is just for me personally, everybody's a little bit different, but for me that clicks like, oh, okay, I'm not there yet because I'm not, I don't have the personality for this, or I'm not motivated enough, or I'm not
Yeah.
stepping up in the right places, and like
The problem is that can be tricky, right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is you can have an individual who has been around for a long time,
yeah,
who by all rights like should be, and I'm just going to use engine boss because that's the engine boss is a pretty important uh position, right? Because now when you're an engine boss, you're running a truck, an engine. If you've been around for a long time and you're an engine operator and you know the engine inside and out and all that stuff, but you are super immature, right? And you don't take criticism well, and you don't play well with others, right? And you come to me and you're like, I want to open my engine boss. Then I have to explain to you, right? Like, hey, we will do this. Like, we will open your engine boss task book, but I want you to do X, Y, and Z.
yeah.
Right. Like, I can't be like, well, you're too immature. Right.
Right.
Like,
You can.
you can, but that doesn't get you anywhere.
Well,
right?
yeah, no, they have to be
From
able to accept it.
From experience. Like, and I have folks who want to do stuff. There was an incident this year where an individual wanted to open a task book and there was miscommunication there, however it looked, and my first initial was no, right? Like, well, they don't need it, right? And then they came back to me and they're like, hey, and like they were like, hey, like, why can't I open this? I'm like, well, you don't need it. Right? Like, you just don't need it. You don't need that.
Yeah.
And then it turned into this big deal, not for us. For me, it turned into a big deal internally where I'm like, what the heck, and it was miscommunication because it's not a task book. It was a position that the person already qualified for. They just wanted to put it, they wanted it in paper that they were actually qualified to do it. So there was just, the communication was off. Right. And I'm like, well, shit. So I had to go back to that individual, be like, all right, let's do it. Like, let's, you're qualified to do it. Like, let's get it on there. Right. So it's a little more cut and dry than just being like, you need to do this before you can do that. Right. Because most of the time for me, it comes down to your mentality, your work ethic, and your maturity level. Right. Because there's nothing worse than a lazy ass engine boss. There's enough of those.
Yeah.
So to answer your question shortly, Kevin, yes, I do try my best to explain and lay out my expectations as clearly as possible. What I struggle with is following up with that when I'm asked numerous times, because then I get short, right?
Yeah.
Then I'll be like, no, right? If I explained it to you once or twice and you keep coming back to me, then my answer is just no.
Well, and for people that do that too, oftentimes they're just trying to check a box.
Right.
You know,
Well,
they're doing something just enough to think like, okay, well now maybe he thinks I'm there. I'm gonna go ask him again. And then I'm gonna go ask him, why are there fireworks going off behind me?
Maybe you said something freaking epic, I guess.
That was awesome. though.
That was pretty epic.
Congratulations.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Perfect answer.
And you know, you have to be careful of those people that are willing to like experience a small amount of discomfort to check boxes to get
Mhm.
into what is essentially a higher paid position,
And
because
see,
then they're
that's,
just gonna
Yep.
they're gonna go right back to the kind of person that they are.
and see, that's the problem with the task book because it's literally it's a task book, right? So there's
Mhm.
all these tasks that are lined out with check marks, and you have to initial them, and you have to, sign them off or whatever. And that's easy. Most people can do that. It's the day to day stuff that people can't piece together, right? Because if you line it out for me and write it down, I can do those things, right? What happens when you take that task book away and they no longer have that as a guide?
Right.
Can they make the decisions on their own, right? Can they show the initiative? Can they be flexible? Can they think outside the box? Can they think on their feet? Right?
Now, is it your
Without that.
job to make sure they're there and able to do that before they get to the task book, or
There's a lot of different ideas behind
Mhm.
when it's appropriate to initiate a task book.
So it's more of
Everyone,
a leadership organization
yeah, it's
structure
more
choice.
it's more of a um if they like it's supposed to be if you have all the classes, right?
Mhm.
And you're qualified to do the tasks that if you want it open, we open it for you.
Yeah.
The problem is there's a lot of people who just go through a bunch of classes, do the classes, and then want the task book, and it doesn't make sense for them to have the task book. Right.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, like if Kevin came to me and was like, hey, I want to open my firing task book. Well, why, Kevin, would you want to open your firing task book? Like, you're a truck driver, right? Like,
Because I want to light stuff on fire.
right. Like, it's like that. Like, it has to align with your career path. And that's where those conversations, like we were talking about earlier, are important, right?
Mhm.
Like, where do you want to go? And how can I help you get there? Right. If you keep telling me that you want to be a patrol,
Mhm.
but then you're asking me to open up some crazy task book, I'm going to ask you why do you want to open it?
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you don't have a good answer, then my answer is probably going to be no, right? Because it doesn't align with what you want to do. A lot of people open task books and get qualified to do stuff so they can go out on their own and make money, which is perfectly fine,
Mhm.
but it doesn't align with the mission of the truck, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't. We had a guy a couple years ago who has never mentioned at all about being a patrol or prevention, a fire investigator, and he signed up for a fire prevention class down in LA. He didn't run it through me. He just signed up on his own and went, right? And I'm like,
Mhm.
why? Like, why are you doing this? Like, why? You've never wanted to be a fire investigator, right? Well, I can make more money. Like, yeah, but you're kind of wasting money right now, like by doing it.
Yeah.
And like he's never worked on it. Like it's nothing he wants to do. There's no passion for it.
Mhm.
It's just something to do, right?
Yeah.
And like I'm trying to curve people from doing that and getting them aligned in the direction that they truly want to go.
Yeah. So what I hear in there, so your perspective on people coming back to you and you getting short with them. One thing that I like, especially now that I have a kid, and so for 2 years, my New Year's resolution was to become a better communicator and learn how to articulate better. And I did a lot of research into communicating, but one of the biggest mindset switches I had to do was if somebody is asking me how to do something or why they have to do something, like if they're coming back to me asking the same question more than once, it's my failure as the communicator that I didn't get the point or enough information across for them to have complete buy-in and understanding to be where they are.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand. That's a real thing. Like I'm a pointer and a grunter.
Yeah.
And
And
so I've been told.
so that means then you know where you're probably really struggling as your communication as leader then.
Yeah,
Because if you got your people coming back, I'm not in your industry, so I don't know it or understand it. But from what I'm hearing right now, my first thought is, if as a leader, I'd be like, dude, I would want my entire team to be certified in fucking everything. Dude, I'd be like, dude, I'd have a rock star team and be like, yeah, every dude in that team has 15 fucking certifications. Like the max you can have is like 18. Like I would have everyone certified, everyone skilled, everyone would be knowledgeable. And then like everyone who ever left my truck, I'd expect them to go like hit the best possible fucking position for their choice and be like, dude, you're going to go run another truck. You're going to go run a business. You're going to go run this. You're now like the state commissioner or whatever it is. Like, I would be expecting people to always be going up, but then that comes down to communication, right? Because if you're trying to just steer them in the right direction, making sure they're not wasting their time, then you're trying to lead them in those certain ways. But that sounds all communication related to me.
No, I'm a very piss poor communicator. And I know this, right? And it's like, because sometimes I get in this mindset that you should know, right? Like you should already know. And that's hard to break, right? Because when you're a full grown adult, like you shouldn't have to be told to clean up your stuff, right? You shouldn't have to be told to, have your boots tied in the morning, right? Like simple stuff.
Yeah.
And then I get so frustrated with that I become short with everything else, right?
Yeah.
Like,
but so this rounding it back, I actually think our next episode should be about communication now that we're here and we're kind of hitting our timeline ends that we wanted to hit. And this actually is a good segue into it if we do communication next month or next episode. But your communication of your expectations, it sounds like what you're describing now, right? Like if you were able to communicate it well enough so everyone understood what your standard expectation was, and they know where that line is, and they know that the expectation is the requirement they have to meet, then you've communicated across. Like I feel like if there's failure in that aspect, then it's a failure of communication because they don't understand it on the level of severity / understanding that they need to in order to make it the standard that you expect. Does that make sense? I feel like I got lost at the end there.
Yeah.
I think it's hard as leaders because like we were on the Marine Corps, like the Marine Corps had very clear standards and expectations, and we all at some point missed the mark didn't understand like what that standard was or what that expectation was. And from a leadership standpoint, I know that my leaders were constantly like on my ass about, some standard or expectation that I was missing because I didn't listen. I just don't listen very good.
Yeah.
Not a very good listener.
But look at the value your boss puts on your trucks now, right? Like they've set the standard of your work environment by putting the expectations that he has. Like this is the standard. Those standards then help keep your values and keep your quality of work at a certain level.
Yeah, and I think I think the point I'm getting at is setting the standards and the expectations is good, but you have to be able to communicate them effectively. And even if you are an effective communicator, even if you're a great communicator, there's still always going to be that one Chris or that one Kevin that is just, not hearing it, not having
processing,
not putting the puzzle together.
Yeah,
exactly.
So here's what I'm gonna do, guys.
Let's hear it.
The let's do the takeaways. There's a lot to unpack in this episode, right?
Yeah.
But listen to your folks, right?
Mhm.
Make sure that when you're communicating to your folks, you're not only communicating your side well, but you're ensuring that they're processing it properly, right?
Uh-huh.
And what else did we hit on?
Care about your people.
Value,
Genuinely care.
valuing
Genuinely
the same
care about
community.
Yeah. Don't only listen to them, but listen to their body
Mhm.
language, right? Their like how are they doing physically, mentally, emotionally, and try to guide those folks the best that we can into a better direction, right?
Mhm.
And always have your folks backs, right?
Yeah.
Always
have their
number
backs.
one. That's got to be number one. You always
Yeah.
have to have your guys' backs.
Yeah. No one
And
can
so-
no one can criticize my guys except for me.
Make sure your people know how much you will have their back, right? So with my best friends, I'll tell them, I'll say, hey, if you deserve being punched in the face, I'm gonna let you get punched in the face. But if somebody's gonna show up and just try to punch you in the face for no reason, they're gonna deal with us as well. But if
Yes.
you deserve it, you're gonna deserve it. Like tell them the boundaries so they know.
So for me, it's like if you deserve to get punched in the face, I'm gonna stop that guy from punching you in the face. But then when that situation's over, I'm gonna punch you in the face.
Just same thing.
Like
I like
that. It's like your little brother. Like I don't have
Yeah.
a little brother, but it's like that sibling. Like nobody beats up my little brother except for me.
Yep. I got a little brother.
Yeah. But all right, guys, I have to go. It was good as always.
As always.
Always good. I love you guys.
See you guys on the next one.
Love you, motivators.
Yeah.
Peace.